So I actually wanted to name this episode as why is Beard more popular than Farnsworth? But I thought that not many people know who John Logie Beard is, and of course, nobody knows Philo Farnsworth. So then I named it after two fairly popular people. One, of course, Thomas Alva Edison, that's the recognized inventor of the bulb, and Nikola Tesla, who was fairly unknown until a few years back, people started making movies about him. So, for those of you that don't know, John Logie Beard is the recognized inventor of the modern electronic television, while in fact, Philo Farnsworth invented the system before him and even had a patent before him. So, this episode is made in support of the fact that most of the history that we know is biased towards people with money, with authority, and with power. Let's discuss all of this in today's episode of Perfectly Average. Now, the basic premise of this episode is that the content you consume is biased. This content could be a YouTube video that you watch or a history lesson that you get in school. Now, this bias is a result of multiple factors, and we'll try and discuss some of them today. Factor number one: authority, power, and money. This is the factor that we discussed in the introduction of this episode. Let's take the example of Mughals and how they were taught to us. When I was in primary school, I remember that Mughals were always glorified. They were regarded as people that brought culture into the Indian subcontinent, that made architectural marvels that are adored by the world to this day. But we were never taught about the atrocities that they did on the population of the country, the looting that they did, the destruction of the historical texts and monuments that they did. And this goes to show that a lot of history has been modified and we're oblivious to it. Now, I don't want to get into the debate of which historical figures should be talked about more often, but I simply want to make a point that a lot of history has been tampered with, and we don't really know what to believe. So, we have to be careful about that. You can see this bias towards the king or the ruler across historical texts. It doesn't matter if it's from Hindu mythology or Greek mythology, there's always a bias. And there are very few texts actually present that are unbiased, written by intellectuals that didn't actually care about being killed by the ruler. Factor number two: relatability. We've talked about history a little bit. Now let's talk about pop culture. Now, if you've ever seen or watched any stand up comedy, at least Indian stand up comedy, then you might know who Zakir Khan is. Zakir Khan is a really popular Indian stand up comic who gained popularity fairly quickly compared to other comics that have made it in the field. Like earlier, it used to be like at least 10 years before you were recognized as a proper comedian and then you were paid a little more. But Zakir Khan did it in almost 5 to 6 years. Now, if you've ever listened to any of his stand up bits, then you would know that he's a very relatable guy. He talks about day to day dilemmas and relationship stuff. And that is what everyone goes through. It doesn't matter if I'm from North India or South India, I can relate to him. That's why he's so popular. Unlike other comedians that have some premises that are hard to get or really not that relatable. So, relatability basically makes you popular. I wanted to point out one thing. Now, if you watch a lot of stand up comedy, then you would know that Zakir isn't the most theoretically funny guy in the Indian comedy scene, but he's the most popular. Why? Because he tells stories, and stories all of us love. So, relatability sells more than skill, is what I'm saying. Factor number three: any publicity is good publicity. Now, after spending a considerable amount of time of my life on watching YouTube videos, I can say with fair confidence that a channel that rants about sensitive stuff like politics, religion, and caste will attract more followers than a channel where a guy is trying to explain why the earth is not flat. This is because of two reasons. Of course, there are people that actually believe what the guy is saying, but most of us are not those people. But the other factor that is responsible for these channels having so much publicity, like these channels that are super offensive or almost periodically funny, is that we give them negative publicity. Like, for example, if you get offended by a video uh, so much that you share it around, hating on that guy basically, but in turn, what you're doing is that you are giving that guy more and more views. And so that guy has more views on his video about how patriotism works versus a science guy who is trying to explain why a flat earth is a myth. And so it becomes a feedback loop of negativity, but a loop nevertheless. And so you can see that a lot of videos nowadays that are the most popular videos on the platform are people ranting about stuff, cursing about stuff, or doing something unoriginal like reacting to some other video on YouTube. Factor number 4, less positive feedback loops. Now, there's a concept called controlled versus autonomous motivation. I'll explain this. Controlled motivation is when you get motivation from incentivization. Like, for example, in a corporate job, if you do some good job, you get a promotion or a raise. The other is the autonomous motivation. This motivation is what you get from creating something or collaborating with something. And this can be seen in any creative field like filmmaking or making music. So a lot of us don't actually share the good stuff. Like in a corporate job, if I have some critical information or knowledge, I will not be willing to share that unless I am incentivized. Because the knowledge isn't the motivation for me. The incentive is. So a lot of the times we don't actually share good stuff or good knowledge with everybody else because we think that by sharing it we'll miss out on the incentive that it gets us. That's why it's pretty easy to spot people that are fairly comfortable in sharing stuff that's not very important, like books, music, and taste in wines with other people. But when it comes to stuff that's important or critical to their job or some incentive, then they are kind of a little hesitant. Factor number 5, negativity versus positivity. Now, I was thinking about this the other day that out of Hitler and Gandhi, who is more popular? And after discussing it with a couple of people, I realized that it's fairly conclusive to say that Hitler is more popular because this is what we discussed in an earlier episode, that negativity is stronger than positivity. And so, notoriety is stronger than fame. So, bad people are more popular than good people. Factor 6, social validation. Nowadays, it's fairly easy to spot these people that pose to be in solidarity with these issues that run across the globe, be it some environmental issue or a cultural or political issue. But these people are not really concerned with these issues as much as they're concerned with the number of likes that they get on the post that they make. Because these people, if they really cared, they would follow up on it after a week, after a month, after a year, after a decade of what's happened. And the reason why they don't is because they actually care about the attention that they get from it and not the actual consequence of the issue. And so you see these trends of people talking about something for a week, for 500 times a day, and then not talking about it at all. And this is the reason that causes this disproportion in the number of views or count of people that know about a certain topic and not about the others. And the internet has played a huge role in this. It encourages sensationalization and discourages boring stuff. That's why more people know how to tweet than to file their taxes. That's it from me. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.